They say words hold power, but Machiavelli would smirk at such naive thinking. In the ruthless theater of power, it is not what you say that terrifies people, but what you refuse to say. Silence is not emptiness. It is a weapon sharper than any sword, colder than any blade. It unsettles, it confuses it, forces others to reveal themselves while you remain untouchable. Think about it. Why does silence in a tense conversation feel more crushing than 1,000 insults? Why do leaders who speak less seem to command more respect? Machiavelli understood this dark art centuries ago. He knew that silence bends people's imagination, turning uncertainty into fear and fear into control. Today we will unlock this secret. By the end of this video, you will understand how silence can mask your intentions, disarm your rivals, and elevate your authority. The question is, are you ready to wield it? Why does silence terrify us more than words? Imagine walking into a room where your rival sits across the table staring at you without a word. No insults, no arguments, no explanations, just silence. Instantly, your mind races. What are they thinking? Are they confident? Are they planning something I cannot see? That inner turmoil is exactly why silence is more powerful than speech. It doesn't reveal, it provokes. Machiavelli, the master of power games, recognized this truth early. In The Prince, he emphasized that rulers should never show all their cards. Words often betray emotions, reveal weaknesses, and expose intentions. But silence leaves the battlefield of interpretation entirely in the hands of your opponent. And when the enemy doesn't know your next move, they begin to destroy themselves with fear and speculation. Think of a chess match. When your opponent hesitates, not moving their piece, your imagination starts to spiral. What are they planning? Are they setting a trap? The silence between moves is often deadlier than the move itself. Machiavelli understood that power doesn't always come from action. It often comes from restraint. History provides brutal examples. Take Stalin, for instance. He was notorious for sitting in meetings, silently letting others speak, argue, and even condemn themselves with their own words. His silence created paranoia. No one knew what he was thinking. No one dared to assume. In the end, his silence alone commanded obedience. Or consider American businessman J.P. Morgan, who was famous for keeping quiet in negotiations, making others anxious enough to offer more than he ever demanded. His silence was not absence, it was pressure. But why is silence so unbearable? The human mind craves certainty. We want to know where we stand, what the other person thinks, and what comes next. Silence denies us that comfort. It creates a void, and in that void, our fears, doubts, and insecurities grow louder. The more the silence stretches, the more power the silent one gains. Machiavelli would call this strategic suffering, forcing others to suffer from their own imagination, while you remain calm and unmoved. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. In an argument, the loudest person often looks desperate, while the quiet one appears stronger, more composed. In relationships, silence after betrayal is more punishing than a storm of angry words. In business, a pause after someone makes an offer can force them to second-guess themselves and improve the deal. Silence used with precision is not passive, it is active manipulation. Now, does this mean one should never speak? Of course not. Machiavelli's brilliance was not about always being silent, but about knowing when silence wounds more deeply than speech. If words are arrows, silence is the invisible poison. It spreads slowly, unpredictably, and often fatally. Let me pose a question. When was the last time you were disarmed? Not by what someone said, but by what they didn't say. Think about the power imbalance in that moment. You were chasing meaning, They were controlling the frame. That is the weapon of silence. It flips control without lifting a finger. And here lies the paradox in a world obsessed with speaking, posting, and shouting opinions. The one who remains silent becomes the most mysterious, the most feared. Machiavelli would smirk at the modern man who cannot endure a few seconds of quiet, because the one who can hold silence without flinching commands it. As we peel back the layers of this art, remember, silence is not just the absence of noise, it is the presence of power. And like any weapon, it must be wielded with care. Strike too often with silence, and you may appear weak or evasive. But wield it at the right moment, and you can bend others to your will without a single word. This is the beginning of Machiavelli's lesson. To win through silence is to master patience, control, and the art of forcing others to play your game. So now the question becomes, if silence is a weapon, what else can it be? In the next section, we'll explore how silence serves as a mask, concealing your true intentions while amplifying your aura of mystery. What makes a mask so unsettling? It's not just what it hides, it's the endless possibilities of what might lie beneath. Silence operates in exactly the same way. It conceals motives, intentions, and emotions, forcing others to project their own fears or hopes onto you. Machiavelli understood that when people cannot read you, they become prisoners of their imagination, and imagination is often crueler than reality. In politics, this mask of silence has been a weapon for centuries. Take Queen Elizabeth IV of England. She was famous for her enigmatic silence on matters of marriage and succession. Every noble in her court speculated endlessly. Will she marry a foreign prince? Will she favor one noble house over another? By refusing to reveal her intentions, Elizabeth kept rivals divided and dependent. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was calculated theater. Psychologically, humans are storytellers. When someone withholds words, our minds rush to fill the void with guesses, interpretations, and narratives. In personal relationships, think about the silent partner who refuses to argue. Their calm refusal to respond often feels more punishing than a shouted insult. The mind of the other partner races. Are they angry? Have they stopped caring? Are they plotting something worse? The mask of silence forces others to reveal themselves, while you remain unreadable. Machiavelli's brilliance lies in this: speech locks you into a position, but silence leaves you infinite options. Once spoken words can be used against you, but silence, it is unassailable. As long as you remain silent, you can deny, shift, or reshape reality as needed. Silence is the ultimate mask, because it allows you to be everything or nothing until the exact moment you decide to act. Consider the battlefield of modern business. Negotiators often use silence to mask their true limits. A buyer who doesn't respond to a price may appear disinterested, even though they desperately want the deal. A COO who withholds opinion in a meeting forces subordinates to scramble for approval, revealing their true priorities. In both cases, silence functions as a mask. It hides your weakness while exposing theirs. But there is also an aura that silence creates, the aura of mystery. Mystery attracts attention because it cannot be solved. Why do people fear the quiet man in the room more than the one shouting? Because the quiet man could be dangerous, or he could be nothing. That uncertainty keeps others on edge. Machiavelli understood this principle and advised rulers to cultivate mystery, for the mysterious are always overestimated. This is not about passive silence. It is about strategic silence, the deliberate choice to say less, to reveal little, to let others unravel themselves in the face of your stillness. To wear silence like a mask is to weaponize ambiguity. The less you show, the more others imagine and the more power you hold. Ask yourself, do you reveal too much when you speak? Do you rush to explain, justify, or defend yourself? If so, you are giving away power. Machiavelli would tell you, control the urge. Let your silence become your mask, and let others choke on their own speculations. But a mask is not invincible. If used carelessly, silence can also create suspicion, mistrust, or even accusations of weakness. That is why the art lies not just in wearing the mask, but in knowing when to remove it. Strategic silence means timing, holding back until the moment when breaking silence delivers maximum impact. So we see silence can be more than a weapon. It can be a disguise, a shield, an aura that reshapes how others perceive you. To master silence is to master the art of being unreadable. And in a world where everyone is desperate to be understood, being unreadable is the ultimate power. But silence is not just a mask. It is also a trap. In the next section, we'll uncover how silence doesn't just hide you, but actively lures your enemies into exposing themselves. What happens when silence is not just a shield, but a weapon that draws others into danger. Silence, when used with precision, becomes a trap, a carefully laid snare that forces your opponents to reveal their weaknesses long before you reveal your strength. Machiavelli understood this dynamic. The less you say, the more your enemies speak, and the more they speak, the more they betray themselves. Consider the art of negotiation. Imagine two rivals at the table. One makes an offer and then waits silent. That silence grows heavier with every second until the other side feels compelled to fill the void. They lower their price, reveal hidden concerns, or over-explain their position. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was bait. By refusing to react, the silent one creates an unbearable pressure that forces the other to make mistakes. History is filled with such traps. Think of Napoleon at certain councils of war. He often listened quietly, letting his generals argue passionately. In their eagerness to prove themselves right, they exposed doubts, disagreements, and personal ambitions. Napoleon's silence wasn't passive, it was diagnostic. He allowed others to entangle themselves in their own words, and then he struck with clarity, having already mapped every weakness. Silence as a trap thrives on human impatience. People cannot endure uncertainty for long. They want clarity, reassurance, response. When none comes, they begin to act impulsively. A politician faced with public silence from an opponent often panics, releasing statements, counterattacks, or even confessions that reveal more than necessary. Machiavelli would say, "Give them enough rope, and they will hang themselves." Even in personal dynamics, the trap of silence works with devastating effect. In arguments, silence forces the other person to escalate, to speak faster, louder, often blurting out truths they would normally conceal. In relationships, silence after betrayal can torment the guilty far more than accusations pushing them to confess or overcompensate. Silence in this way is not passive resistance, it is active psychological warfare. But why does the trap work so well? Because silence destabilizes the balance of control. When you withhold response, you shift the burden onto the other. Suddenly, they must guess your intentions, justify their own actions, or fill the emptiness with nervous chatter. Every word they spill becomes intelligence for you and a vulnerability for them. Machiavelli knew that the wise leader doesn't always need to act. Sometimes the enemy destroys themselves through reaction. This is why he valued patience and restraint. The true strategist waits, lets silence pull the strings, and then moves only when the opponent is already tangled. Think of silence as a chess player's pause. The longer you wait before making your move, the more your opponent doubts their strategy. They begin to question, did I blunder? Did I miss something? Their imagination becomes the snare, and your silence is the invisible net, holding it in place. However, silence as a trap must be intentional, not careless. If you remain silent at the wrong time, you risk appearing absent, indifferent, or weak. But when silence is timed with precision, after a question, after an accusation, after an offer, it turns into a blade hidden beneath the cloak. So ask yourself, are you the one rushing to fill the silence, or are you the one who controls it? If you learn to hold silence to let others squirm in its weight, you will see them reveal far more than they intended. This is the Machiavellian lesson. Silence doesn't just conceal, it provokes, pressures, and traps. Master it, and you'll find that often victory is handed to you without a fight. But there is yet another layer. Silence is not only a weapon, not only a mask, not only a trap. It is also a throne. In the next section, we'll explore how silence is tied to authority itself, and why the most powerful leaders are often the quietest in the room. Why do the most powerful figures in history often speak the least? It is because silence, when wielded with confidence, does not just mask or trap. It establishes authority. Words, after all, are plentiful and cheap. Anyone can talk. But the ability to command respect without speaking is rare, and it signals a strength that others instinctively recognize. Machiavelli understood that true power does not shout, it radiates. Silence projects the image of a leader who does not need validation, who does not scramble to defend themselves, who does not waste energy explaining. The less a ruler speaks, the more weight every word carries. In The Prince, Machiavelli notes that appearances shape power more than reality. Silence is the ultimate appearance, it suggests, depth, wisdom, and unshakable control, even if behind the mask lies uncertainty. Consider George Washington. In meetings, he often remained silent, listening more than speaking. Yet his presence dominated. When he finally spoke, his words struck with authority precisely because they were rare. Or take today's corporate titans, think of Steve Jobs, who was known to sit silently in product reviews, his gaze alone unnerving entire teams. The silence was not emptiness, it was dominance. Everyone waited on his reaction, and that waiting created gravity. Psychologically, silence signals that you are not desperate. In a conversation, the one who fills every gap often appears anxious, while the one who can hold silence seems confident, even superior. Authority thrives on this imbalance. If others lean forward to decode your silence, if they anxiously seek your approval or dread your judgment, you have already won the psychological high ground. But silence as authority is not just about intimidation, it also cultivates mystique. The fewer words you use, the more others interpret you as wise. This is why sages, prophets, and monarchs across cultures have been remembered for short, cryptic sayings rather than endless speeches. People revere those who seem above the noise, and yet silence must be paired with presence. Authority is not merely the absence of speech, but the aura that accompanies it. Posture, gaze timing. A leader who is silent but slouched appears weak. A leader who is silent but composed radiates dominance. Silence amplifies what is already there: discipline, confidence, certainty. However, Machiavelli would warn authority built on silence must be reinforced with decisive action when the moment comes. Endless silence without clarity risks eroding trust. The great rulers speak sparingly, but when they do, their words must be final, sharp, and beyond question. Authority is maintained not by silence alone, but by the balance of silence and decisive speech. Ask yourself this: do people lean in when you speak, or do they tune out because you speak too often? Authority depends on scarcity. The less accessible your words, the more valuable they become. And in that scarcity, Silence becomes your throne. Silence, then, is not just defense, not just a weapon, not just a trap. It is the essence of presence itself. Those who master it become more than participants in conversation. They become the axis around which the conversation turns. But what happens when silence is misunderstood? When does silence stop being strength and start being weakness? In the next section, we will uncover the dangers of silence and why Machiavelli cautioned that even the most powerful weapon must be wielded with care. Every weapon, no matter how sharp, carries the risk of cutting the one who wields it. Silence is no different. While it can be a mask, a trap, and a throne of authority, when misused, silence can also backfire, turning into a sign of weakness, indifference, or even cowardice. Machiavelli, though a champion of restraint, warned that strategy without timing becomes folly. Silence, if uncalibrated, is not strength. It is a void that others may rush to fill with suspicion, doubt, or contempt. Think of the courtroom of public opinion. When a leader remains silent in the face of scandal, what do people assume? Rarely do they interpret silence as wisdom. More often they whisper, "He is guilty." "She is hiding something." They have no defense. History offers brutal lessons. Richard Nixon's long silences during the Watergate scandal did not project power. They fueled the perception of guilt and weakness. His silence wasn't commanding, it was damning. The same applies in personal relationships. Imagine someone wronged by betrayal who chooses silence. At first, the silence may punish, but prolonged silence eventually erodes communication. The partner stops fearing it and begins resenting it, interpreting it as emotional abandonment. What once felt like authority turns into distance, and distance kills trust. Silence becomes a wedge rather than a weapon. Why does this happen? Because silence is not a universal symbol. Its meaning is interpreted through context. In a negotiation, a pause may be power. In a crisis, that same pause may be incompetence. Machiavelli understood that power lies not in the tool itself, but in how and when it is used. Just as a sword can defend or betray its master, silence can fortify authority or destroy it. Consider business leaders who overuse silence in meetings. At first, their restraint may create an aura of gravitas, but if they never voice decisions, never clarify direction, their teams begin to flounder. Silence here is no longer presence, it is absence. The vacuum of leadership invites chaos. Employees begin to make their own interpretations, often conflicting ones, until trust in leadership collapses. Machiavelli would say a prince who hides behind silence risks being seen as weak or indecisive. Authority demands moments of clarity. A ruler who never speaks, never commands, soon finds their silence replaced by the voices of rivals. In politics, this is fatal. Even in strategy, silence must be balanced with decisive speech. Picture a general who never speaks to his soldiers, only observes silently. At first, the troops may find him mysterious, but as battles rage and orders remain unspoken, the silence breeds confusion, fear, and eventually rebellion. What was once power morphs into paralysis. There is also the danger of silence being weaponized against you. Skilled manipulators understand that your silence can be framed as weakness. An opponent may step into the gap, seizing the narrative while you remain quiet. By the time you speak, the story has already been written against you. In Machiavellian terms, failing to control perception is the same as surrendering power. So how do we prevent silence from becoming self-destruction? The key is intentionality. Silence must never be accidental. It must be deliberate, strategic, and followed by timely action. A ruler, a negotiator, a leader must know when to let silence torment and when to break it with words that strike like thunder. Authority lies in contrast. Too much speech dilutes power. Too much silence erodes it. The art is in the balance. Ask yourself, when you choose silence, do you do so to control the frame, or are you merely avoiding conflict? Are you withholding words to build tension, or because you lack the courage to speak? The difference is everything. To be silent out of fear is weakness. To be silent out of calculation is power. This is the danger Machiavelli would warn us about. Silence is only powerful when paired with purpose. Without that purpose, it is not silence, it is surrender. And yet when wielded with mastery, silence can transform every arena of life: politics, business relationships, and personal power. Which brings us to our final exploration. How can you, in today's world, apply Machiavelli's art of silence with precision? What use is Machiavelli's lesson on silence if it remains confined to dusty books and fading thrones? The true power of this art lies in its application to our world, where words flow faster than ever, where noise has become the currency of attention, and where silence, paradoxically, has never been more rare or more valuable. We live in an age of constant chatter. Social media rewards the loudest voice meetings, are filled with endless words, and relationships drown in over-communication. Everyone is trying to be heard. But here lies the opportunity in a world obsessed with noise. Silence becomes the ultimate disruption. To master silence today is to stand out not as empty, but as intentional, controlled, and commanding. Let's begin with business. In negotiations, silence remains a deadly weapon. When someone makes an offer, resist the urge to respond immediately. Hold silence. Let them sit with their own words. That pause forces insecurity, often leading them to sweeten the deal or reveal their limits. It is not passivity, it is active pressure. Even in presentations, a strategic pause before delivering a key point draws every eye to you, amplifying the weight of your message. Silence in this context transforms into punctuation. It makes your words thunder. In leadership, silence builds presence. A leader who listens more than speaks earns trust because their words are rare and deliberate. Imagine a manager who reacts instantly with endless commentary versus one who listens silently, then delivers a single, sharp judgment. Whose words carry more weight? The second, always. In fact, some of the most effective executives use silence as a tool of control, forcing teams to reveal priorities, insecurities, and ambitions in the empty space their silence creates. Now consider personal relationships. Silence, when applied with care, communicates more than words ever could. After betrayal, silence can force reflection in the guilty. In conflict, a pause before responding prevents escalation and shifts control. But silence here must be precise. It should signal strength and composure, not neglect. The key is body language, a calm gaze, steady posture, and intentional pause. Silence plus presence equals dominance. Silence plus avoidance equals weakness. Even in everyday conversations, silence is a test of patience and power. When someone tries to provoke you, do you rush to defend yourself, or do you let their words echo into silence, exposing their desperation? When asked a difficult question, do you scramble for an answer, or do you let silence stretch, making your eventual reply all the more decisive? These micro moments, repeated over time, train others to respect your composure. But silence today also requires adaptation. Unlike in Machiavelli's time, our digital world punishes prolonged silence. Ignore a message too long, and others may assume indifference. Remain silent on an issue, and the narrative may be written without you. The trick is not to abandon silence, but to control its rhythm. In a fast-moving environment, The power lies in knowing when to pause and when to speak with precision. Practical application is simple but demanding. 1. Pause before responding. In any argument, negotiation, or discussion, add a deliberate silence. Let others feel the weight. 2. Speak less but mean more. Reduce the number of words you use but sharpen their impact. 3. Observe in silence. Listen not just to words but to what people reveal under pressure. 4. Time your silence. Use it as a mask, when you must hide as a trap, when you want others to reveal themselves, and as authority when you want respect. 5. Break silence with force. When you do speak, make sure your words close the discussion, not extend it. Machiavelli would remind us, power is not about endless action, but about control of yourself and of others. Silence is self-control made visible. It tells the world, I do not need to rush, I do not need to explain, I will move only when it serves me. So as you leave this lesson, ask yourself, are you enslaved by the noise of the world, or can you master the stillness within it? In a society drowning in voices, those who command silence command attention. And in the end, as Machiavelli might whisper, silence is not the absence of power, it is its purest form. Silence is not weakness, it is not passivity. It is the hidden thread that binds together strategy, authority, and control. Machiavelli understood that words can expose, but silence conceals. Words can defend, but silence destabilizes. Words can demand, but silence commands. We have seen how silence works as a weapon, unsettling those who fear the unknown. As a mask, it hides intentions and creates mystery. As a trap, it forces enemies to betray themselves. And as authority, it transforms a leader's presence into something undeniable. Yet, as we also learned, silence is dangerous if misused. Wielded without purpose, it can become weakness, indifference, or surrender. The art lies not in being silent always, but in choosing silence at the moment when it speaks louder than words. Now think about your own life. In conversations, in conflicts, in negotiations, how often do you rush to fill the space? What would happen if you resisted, if you let silence work for you instead of against you? Power, after all, is not just in what you say, but in what you refuse to say. So here is your challenge. Begin practicing silence deliberately. Use it as a pause, as a shield, as a mirror that forces others to reveal themselves. And when you do speak, let your words strike with the weight of thunder after a storm. If this lesson has opened your eyes to the Machiavellian art of silence, remember to like, share, and leave a comment. Tell us how you've used silence to shift power in your own life. And stay tuned, because in the next video, we'll explore another paradox of power, why appearing harmless may be the most dangerous strategy of all.